How do you fix the absolute worst entry in a franchise? Today we are tackling Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker. Can we fix it? Yes, we can. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of the Nerd Byword podcast. Thank you so much for joining us this week as we complete the circle and try to fix the final movie in the Star Wars sequel trilogy, The Rise of Skywalker. This movie is a mess, ladies and gentle people, and we have our work cut out for us. But before Kris and I dive right in, it's time for some good old-fashioned That's right, nerd news. Kris, what is new in the world of nerddom?
So the inaugural WitcherCon took place on Friday, July the 9th on the YouTube and Twitch channels of both Netflix and CD Projekt Red. Fans of the multi-platform property were treated to behind-the-scenes looks, incredible music from the house band. I'm telling you, it was amazing. An in-depth look at the universe's original card game of Gwent, a look back at the history of the game's development, and the much-anticipated teases of new content that is coming soon. Among the reveals and teases that were shared, here are a few highlights. The Last Wish, the first book in the series, will be receiving a hardcover illustrated version set to release in December, much like the Harry Potter franchise has. Dark Horse Comics will be releasing a Netflix-inspired Geralt of Rivia figure that will also release in December. Rafal Jaki is making their writing debut in The Witcher Ronin, a manga set in the Witcher universe and heavily inspired by ancient Japan. A next-gen version of The Witcher 3, The Wild Hunt, a previous nerd commendation, will be arriving soon on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series S and X with additional Netflix-inspired downloadable content. A teaser trailer and promotional poster for The Witcher Nightmare of the Wolf was released. This anime, covering the story of Geralt's mentor, Vesemir, will arrive on Netflix August the 23rd. If the month of December seems a tad repetitive, there's a reason. That's because Season 2 of The Witcher comes to Netflix December 17th. A full trailer and promotional poster for the second season was revealed, detailing the training of Ciri, or Cirilla, the lion cub of Sintra, and her relationship as it grows with Geralt. There was also a cryptic tease towards the end of that footage about what exactly is going on with Yennefer. Needless to say, I'm psyched out of my mind for all this glorious content coming in the very near future. What say you, Dave?
So, I'm a little weird here. So, as far as Witcher content goes, my order of preference might be a little different than most Witcher fans. First and foremost to me is, of course, the excellent book series. Right after that, the Netflix series, and pretty much in last place is the video game. Now, don't get me wrong, I think the video games are very good, and CD Projekt Red has done a great job with those. But when I think of new, exciting Witcher content, it's very exciting, first of all, that we're getting this totally awesome hardback illustrated edition of the first book in the series. I'm very excited to pick that up. And the teaser trailer of the new season of the Netflix series has me super psyched. Now, the extra downloadable content for the next-gen edition of The Witcher 3, on the other hand, leaves me pretty cold because, A, who's going to be able to play it, considering the shortage of video game consoles and the fact that nobody actually ever can get a hold of a PS5 or Xbox Series X or S. But on top of that, that's going to be most likely another full-price reissue of an old game with just some rudimentary extra content, which I'm getting pretty tired of as far as what the two main competitors in the console wars, Sony and Microsoft, have been doing. So Less excited about the video game stuff, but now the new Netflix season and this new beautifully illustrated edition of the novel, I'm all there for.
Yeah, so I recently got an incredible deal on Comixology for the digital omnibus of the Witcher comics, and the art in there is super. Like Dave, I think you'll love the comics, especially as a horror fan. It's super spooky. Going through those bogs, it's super atmospheric. I think I think I'm going to go against the grain here. I'm super excited about season 2. The anime looks cool. I think I'm most excited about that illustrated edition of The Last Wish. I recently wrapped up reading that and I loved it so much. So I'm super excited to get my hands on that one.
I'm actually very curious about the comic book omnibus that you read. Do you know, is that adaptation of pre-existing stories, or is this original content in the Witcher universe?
I'm not exactly certain. I'm not very far into it. Probably like the first arc. It feels very much kind of like the where the Last Wish, was very much short stories. It
Hmm.
feels kind of like just almost like the short stories of Sherlock Holmes, where it's just kind of like tales that happen in this universe. When you have this expansive history of a character, there's going to be stuff that you can always kind of go back to. So that's what it kind of feels like, at least what I've gotten into so far. It doesn't jump out as anything that I've seen in The Last Wish or the second book in the series so far, or season 1 of The Witcher. But yeah, I totally echo your sentiments on the game. I just wrapped up the Wild Hunt, both of those DLCs, and not only can I not get my hands on a Series S or X, I'm not going to shell out another $60, when I've already beaten all the game except for what, 3 or 4 missions. I think I'm good on that. Talk to me when you got the Witcher 4 in the works.
Now there you go. That's something I can get behind.
All right, Dave, what is on the news desk for you this week?
Yeah, so I'm actually really excited about this little bit of news. I have been stark raving mad on this podcast for weeks now about Boom Studios' Something is Killing the Children, a horror comic that I think is probably one of the best quote unquote indie comics on the market right now. And I absolutely adore it. It wrapped up its first major arc a couple months back and then has started sort of a flashback arc now where you get to sort of the origin story of the main character, and it still is hitting all the right notes. So the Hollywood Reporter is reporting, shockingly enough, that Trevor Macy and Mike Flanagan, the people behind Intrepid Pictures, are preparing to work on an adaptation of Something is Killing the Children for Netflix. Now, if those names are familiar, they should be. They are the people behind the very excellent Haunting of Hill House on Netflix, as well as the Stephen King adaptation of Dr. Sleep and Gerald's Game. Now, Dr. Sleep was very good. Gerald's Game I've not checked out yet. And at the very least, the first season of The Haunting of Hill House was just absolute beautiful, spooky goodness. So seeing people who have a love of the horror genre tackling Something is Killing the Children and trying to bring it to the screen has me very, very, very excited. This is a property that I think needs to be much more in the mainstream. It's within the comic book industry a huge hit, obviously, but I really think that the general audience needs to be drawn into this sucker. It is just such a good story, and I cannot wait to see how they adapt this unique visual style of the series. So, Chris, I'm psyched. Something is Killing the Children may be coming to Netflix as a series in the next few years.
Yeah, and we've been on this one for quite some time. I haven't checked it out yet, but I just have to say, once again, Boom Studios is absolutely killing it, pun intended, when it comes to like great content coming out of that
The
publishing line.
children that they're killing the children.
But I'm telling you, man, like between this book, between Eve, that I absolutely adore and have nerd commended before by Victor Laval, Tom Taylor's got a book, I think it's like 7 Secrets or something that I'm dying to get my hands on. Grant Morrison's got Proctor Valley Road that I've still got on my to read pile. I have so much, like, I just give myself so much homework when it comes to reading comics. There's just so much stuff from Boom Studios that I am just so excited to dive into.
Yeah, and Something is Killing the Children for me is right there at the top of the pile. So, just really, really excited for this adaptation. Now, if only we can finally, see the adaptation of Y the Last Man. That'd be nice. I've been waiting for that since before Jesus was
I think
born, it
that's
feels.
coming really soon. I want to say it's like next month or something like that.
Well, I tell you what, that might stand as my absolutely all-time favorite series, so I cannot wait to see what they did with that as an adaptation as well.
Looks like September 13th in a quick Google search is what I'm seeing.
Well, not too much longer then. Alrighty, folks, that's what we got for nerd news for you. Stick around after a quick break. We'll be back with the big kahuna, the big talk. We're going to try to fix the Rise of Skywalker. Good luck to us, Kris.
Cheers.
And we are back. Ladies and gentlemen, nerds, here it is. The ever popular, all-time favorite, That's right, it's time for the big talk. Let's go ahead and dive in to Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, the final movie in the sequel trilogy, directed by J.J. Abrams, featuring, of course, all the returning characters from previous movies, including some we really didn't need. Palpatine. And of course, as always, we are going to dive in and try to fix this monstrosity. Both Kris and I have selected 3 big fixes that we think would make the movie a lot better, as well as several minor fixes in the lightning round at the end. We'll be taking turns sharing our problems with the movie and how we think the movie could have been improved. Kris, are you ready?
I think I am.
Then let's dive on in with your very first fix for Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker.
It is the most troubling thing about, well, one of at least the most troubling things about this entire sequel trilogy. Rey's family retcon. It is deeply troubling to me. I thought one of the reasons that The Last Jedi stands alone for me as one of my favorite movies of all time is the absolutely beautiful idea that anybody can come from any type of background and be this prodigious character with this immense amount of power, and it doesn't matter who your parents were, who your grandparents were. And that was just absolutely, they put the kibosh on that for whatever reason. And I feel this is a larger symptom of a greater disease that is this film, of taking 2 to 2.5 hours and basically just washing away everything that happened in the previous entry. No matter how you feel about The Last Jedi, I think a lot of people would appreciate the fact that we're opening up this universe, this galaxy far, far away, to more than just 1 or 2 families. And it is absolutely mind-boggling to me that you would limit yourself. You're shooting yourself in the foot, storytelling-wise, when you are limiting yourself to this just family feud, this Hatfields and McCoys in space, and it's only the Palpatines and Skywalkers that really measure up to anything. And it all has to be this, like, it makes the galaxy seem so small. And I know that is par for the course when it comes to Star Wars as a franchise, as an IP. We always go back to Tatooine. We have like 5 or 6 planets that we can name off the top of our head that we always just go back to, but it makes the world seem so small. And it's a self-inflicted wound, and I don't understand it, why it has to be this way. I am just absolutely flabbergasted as to why it has to be this way. So I would absolutely just wipe away the whole Rey is a Palpatine thing and just let her be the child of Junkers. Like, because the fact that she can rise from that, coming from a quote unquote nobody to being one of the most powerful beings in this entire universe, is just a beautiful thing. It's rags to riches. It's a tried and true literary storytelling thing. Like, it works. It has proven itself time and again. Why are you limiting yourself with this? And it is one of the most deeply disturbing things about any Star Wars movie that I've ever watched.
Yeah, I think that's par of the course for J.J. Abrams here, who very much. The movie feels rushed. I think that's the first thing we need to observe. The movie is very much rushed, even though it's a very long movie at 2.5 hours. And it really feels exactly as you said, like at least half of this movie is backpedaling on The Last Jedi, and then the other half is trying to tell, the remainder of the story. So this is really two movies crammed into one is what we're getting here. We're getting basically J.J. Abrams' version of The Last Jedi and J.J. Abrams' version of The Rise of Skywalker smooshed into one. And the movie doesn't really have any room to breathe in a lot of ways because of that. Now, it seems to me that J.J. Abrams was in The Force Awakens very much trying to plant some kind of seed about Rey. And it's not a surprise that the fan base was speculating, is she a Skywalker? Maybe she's a Kenobi. And that speculation was fun and all. I would have liked some kind of interesting reveal about her background beyond your parents were just a bunch of nobody junkers. But at the same time, I don't think her being a Skywalker, her being a Kenobi, and even her being a Palpatine was the right way to go. I'll agree with you on this. Once it was established in The Last Jedi that she came basically from nothing, it should not have been backpedaled in this movie. And Abrams' obsession with this sort of twistiness, you really notice it in this movie in particular. Everything has to be a twist. It's almost M. Night Shyamalan levels at this point. Everything is kind of has to be a twist. The thing that didn't need a twist was Rey's background. It goes too far back on the Last Jedi. Now, if we wipe that whole establishment of The Last Jedi out, then it opens up some interesting possibilities of who her parents could have been. Sure. But as soon as that was established in The Last Jedi, backpedaling here was simply a mistake. It should have stood as is in this movie. That's the fix. I totally agree with that.
It reminds me, and by no means do I want to come across as just a negative of this creator's work, but this feels like the Dan Slott of kind of filmmakers. I get the same vibes when I read Dan Slott's Spider-Man or Dan Slott's Fantastic Four. He's making retcons and making twists and changes, like you said, for what reason? I think for 10 years on Amazing Spider-Man, we had so much kind of sleight of hand in a character just to keep him in this Peter Pan stage of development, just to keep him, editorial says he can't be married, so we're just going to put him in this relationship, but then he's going to be back out of that. And then for what? And now you have him taking away Franklin Richards' mutant identity just because it seems, at least from the outside looking in, he doesn't want to play ball with the X office and the editorial. So just kind of making these retcons and changes just for the sake of changing up things, just to shake it up. It's kind of like a snake eating its own tail.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I mean, ultimately, in The Rise of Skywalker, there was way too many fake outs and way too many twists that seem to be trying to sort of disguise that the movie is just not very well thought out, ultimately.
All right, Dave, I'm really interested to dig into your first big fix, because it would have been one of mine as well.
I really think that Palpatine has absolutely, positively no business being in this movie. None. The dude's story is done, and by bringing him back, and admittedly being incredibly vague about bringing him back, like it's sort of implied he's a clone of some sort, but it's not ever really spelled out. By bringing him back, you do something incredibly bad, and that is that you are messing with the original trilogy. Now stop messing with my original trilogy. Darth Vader turned to the light side and eliminated the Emperor, and that was his redemption. And so you are wiping away the fall and return to the light side of Anakin Skywalker for a cheap return of a character that in this movie, let's be honest, is so over the top and so far removed from that cunning portrayal that we saw even in the prequels to a certain extent of Palpatine. Like, this is just a cackling madman, like, cloning gone bad or something. And I understand exactly what happened here. Again, it's the apology tour for The Last Jedi. Rian Johnson broke my toy, Snoke. So now I need a Snoke substitute. Well, I'll just bring Palpatine back to fill that void. Because very clearly, you need to have an external, higher up enemy than Kylo Ren if you want him to turn back to the light side. There's got to be another enemy, above him at that point. So, hey, I don't have Snoke anymore. I'm just going to go ahead and bring back Palpatine. But by doing so, I'm going to whip out a $10 word. You besmirch Return of the Jedi. Stop besmirching Return of the Jedi. That moment of Vader turning back to the light side is crucial to the entirety of the story. And by then saying, well, what he did didn't matter, it's just as bad as The Force Awakens saying, well, the victory over the Empire didn't matter, because a few years later we get Empire 2.0, only we go ahead and we call them the First Order.
Yeah, and kind of an interesting reaction that you had to my point. I'll do the exact same thing here, just to play devil's advocate. If you wanted to do that, you sure as hell better do a good job out of it. But they did a really crappy job doing it here. If you're going to reintroduce Palpatine as the big bad, you're going to have to do a lot to win people over by it. And they did absolutely nothing in that regard. I mean, like we talk about this in comics, there's so much happening off panel, off page. Everything happens off screen here. He's just here. He just shows up. There's no explanation for why he's here again. He goes from, Ian McDermott's portrayal, his performance was between him and Ewan McGregor. They carried the prequels. Like, their chiropractor bills had to be through the roof because they carried that franchise, that trilogy of the prequels. He went from being this scene-chewing, like, actor savant into this mustache-twirling silent film villain. Like, what was this? And none of it was believable. It came completely out of nowhere. What works about the Emperor as the big bad, both in the prequels and the original trilogy, is you have seeds planted all the way throughout in each film. Even if it is 30 seconds of screen time, you have something that plants a seed which will sprout into a full-fledged bouquet of chaos by the time we get to the third film. You have absolutely nothing here. You just show up and here he is, no explanation, no reasoning, and it absolutely is just utter chaos.
Absolutely. And I will also say this, because I know somebody on social media is going to, how do the kids say, come at me about this. Yes, I'm a huge fan of the expanded universe. And yes, I am aware they brought Palpatine back in the expanded universe too, in a comic book series. And
that kid might be me.
Yeah, and I'm going to be, I believe that. And I'm going to be completely honest, that was probably one of my least favorite parts of the expanded universe as well. The dude needs to stay dead. His story is over, move on. Stop basking in nostalgia and tell a good story. That's all I'm asking for.
Well, and this goes into one of my lightning round points, is everything that is, I'm just going to save it for later, but absolutely. I'm just going to save it for later because I have much more to say on this, but absolutely.
Let's go ahead then instead, Chris, and dive into your second big fix for the Rise of Skywalker.
I think the most uncomfortable thing about when you take a look back now, we've visited all three of these films, and the thing that makes me most uncomfortable is, and John Boyega said as much when he spoke his truth after all three films were done, and he cashed in his last check from Disney, and he walked away from Lucasfilm more than likely to never return. There are only two characters in this entire sequel trilogy that had any kind of nuance, that were given any kind of depth of character, any true development. And it is really just uncomfortable that Rey and Kylo Ren / Ben Solo were the only ones. Like, it's their world and everybody else is just shrubbery and scenery around it. Like, John Boyega, it hurts my heart how talented of an actor he is and how completely wasted he was. It literally gives me emotional pain. Oscar Isaac is an absolutely tour de force as an actor. I mean, I can't be excited enough about what he's going to do with Moon Knight. Ex Machina was like one of the coolest sci-fi films of all time. So the dude is like out of his mind talented, and they are reduced to nothing but scenery for these two characters that are put up on a pedestal. I mean, like, and this movie in particular is like underlining that with a permanent marker and a highlighter. This is just Rey and Kylo's story, and everything else is just playing second fiddle to that. That's why Palpatine falls flat and nobody gives a shit about him in this movie. It's because this is just, oh, we got to turn Ben back, and this is just redemption story of this horrible war criminal, and we've got to turn him back to the light side. And Rey is going through her struggle, and for what it's worth, they did a great job with those two characters. It's just unfair and unjust in my mind that they're the only ones that have any true depth and have any kind of true kind of traction throughout these three films.
I don't necessarily think that Ben Solo has particular traction in this movie. I'll agree with you that there's just not enough to do for everybody, particularly beyond, physically doing something, like actually having a character arc and interesting things happening to them. There's a lot of stuff that's left on the floor here. Really, what was the point of half of the stuff happening in this movie with some of these characters? But I don't think this movie necessarily served Ben Solo well either. Like, his whole quote unquote redemption was a very, very weird moment to me. Like, how exactly did the death of his mother snap him out of it? How did he suddenly just like start hallucinating Han Solo? I mean, we know it's not a Force ghost. Han was not exactly a Jedi. So, my question here is like, what was the internal logic of all of that whole moment? And then once again, they try to basically pull a Vader, which is freedom from consequence. He's done horrible things. If you're going to try to do a story where Ben Solo goes to the dark side, does horrible things, and then finds the light again, that's fine. But instead of trying to repeat the whole Vader thing, I turn good and then I sacrifice myself. He should have turned like at the end of The Last Jedi. And then you have a movie to actually explore the consequences of this. He's going to have to face up with what he did. Dude killed his dad and one of the most beloved characters in the Star Wars franchise. How do you come back from something like that? Now, there's some interesting writing to be done. There's some interesting character acting to be done. What we got instead is pretty much useless. And don't even get me started on Finn. Holy smokes, dude. Like, he is for like 90% of the movie trying to tell Rey something, and then he never tells her anything. We never found out what he was trying to say. Was he trying to say, I love you? Was he trying to say, I think I'm force sensitive? Was he trying to say, oops, I stubbed my toe? I want to know. Why are you teasing something that you're not willing to answer? It's nonsense. So yeah, Kris, I'm exactly with you. I would say that Ben is probably not served all that well either. It's a very good story for Rey overall, but all the other characters in my book get a short shift here.
No, I don't want to misrepresent like my viewpoints. I don't think it's a good job. I think Rey is served the best. She's like they do the best job telling her story. I'm just saying, like, as a matter of like screen time and substance of screen time, they give the most to those two characters.
That's true.
But
yes.
The other ones are absolutely left in the dust. That's my big gripe.
I totally agree with that.
All right, Dave, what is big fix number 2 for you?
The easiest fix is to learn a different way of telling a story, because apparently J.J. Abrams is obsessed with MacGuffins. The idea of there's an object that you have to acquire and everybody's after it and hilarity ensues. He's not really making a Star Wars movie at this point so much as he's making an Indiana Jones movie. I mean, Indiana Jones movies always are MacGuffin focused. That is the nature of the story. You have the Ark of the Covenant, you have those stones in Temple of Doom, and then you have, of course, the Holy Grail in the last one of those, because I don't acknowledge part 4. I just don't.
It doesn't exist. Nope. And this fifth one, just stop production now. Just stop it. I don't want it.
I don't think any true fan really does, Chris. but so it's just like every time Abrams tells a story, he has to have a MacGuffin. It's a shortcut for him to tell a story in the Star Wars universe. Well, I'll just throw some object in there that's everybody wants, and then the action kind of writes itself, rather than taking a little time and really constructing an interesting story. The Force Awakens had the same thing going on with the map in BB-8. It's just like, hey, there's something everybody wants. Let's just see everybody chasing their tails trying to get it. And that's a problem. Say what you will about The Last Jedi. I certainly have my problems with it. But the one thing it doesn't do is tell a MacGuffin-based story. There isn't one single object that is basically running the entire story for every single character. And yet, when Abrams returned for this movie, he basically returned to that exact same trick again. Let's play the MacGuffin game. And I'm just very tired of that kind of storytelling in Star Wars. For some stuff, it works. Like Indiana Jones, for example. There has to be an object that he's pursuing. That's kind of the nature of, that whole setup. But in Star Wars, I don't quite understand that. The original movie had sort of a MacGuffin, with the Death Star plans in R2-D2. But then Empire didn't have a MacGuffin. Return of the Jedi didn't have a MacGuffin. I would argue that none of the prequels were MacGuffin-based. So why are we so hung up on this fetch quest? So in my book, like structurally, this whole movie would have to be rewritten to be fixed. The motivation, what people are after, all of that would have to be reconstructed, because they're just taking a shortcut with this one object again, and it is so frustrating to watch, Chris.
Yeah, I saw something on social media that I'm going to completely steal here, and I'm gonna edit it for our language content. But same crap, different butthole. It's the same stuff. It's literally the same thing. Like, this feels, and I'm playing Skyrim right now, and I absolutely love it. It's super open world. It's probably one of the most expansive video games I've ever played. But there are some of these side missions. Oh my God, go here to this location on the map, pick up a book, bring it back to this person at this location on the map. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to fire up a podcast while I'm playing, because I'm going to get the XP, I'm going to get the gold, I'm going to level up. But there's literally no dialogue, nothing. And that's when you make that the main storyline in your movie, not once, but twice in 2 films. Honey, you got problems. It is so blasé. And like, I had a really strange experience watching this movie again. And we talked about this, I think, on the last episode when we were teasing this, as much as you can tease this movie. I've only seen it once, and I wasn't looking forward to it. But then, like, I hit play, and like the first 30 minutes of this movie, I was like, this is really fun. Like, I'm really enjoying this. Did I really dislike this movie that much? And then that 30-minute mark hits, and it's like this invisible wall just falls down. And then it turns into this boring-ass side quest.
Yeah, that's actually why I keep recommending Horizon Zero Dawn to anybody who will listen, because the one thing in that game is that there are no useless side quests. Each side quest is unique and thrilling and adds something to the mythology. So if you got that Skyrim blues, man, Horizon Zero Dawn does not have that problem. But yeah, it's exactly the problem.
I felt the same thing with the Outer Worlds. Everything meant something, and like I said, when I nerd commended it, like literally the epilogue of that game is you did this, you chose to do this side mission, and this is how it benefited the story. So I'm totally right there with you.
Yeah, so that is exactly the problem that we're seeing here. We're seeing what feels like an extended side mission, and we're not getting the meat and potatoes of the story. All right, Kris, what is your next big point on how we can fix the Rise of Skywalker?
Okay, so we touched on it before about how so much of this film, the vast majority of it, is an apology or a retcon or a snubbing of what happened in The Last Jedi. And right up there with the, the erasure of Rey's parentage, one of the most egregious is the absolute erasure of Rose Tico. You know, we had our nitpicks of the whole side quest, if you will, to use that terminology again, of Canto Bite and the master locksmith or whatever, code breaker. But one of even in that kind of mucky situation, I thought Rose as a character was refreshing and honest and new and authentic. And they completely sidelined her into this movie with like 3 lines. They put her back at base with Leia and maybe gave her 3 lines, and they were just like, look out, Finn, and like the most reducted story. And it is absolutely infuriating. And to cater to the worst type of fans, the people who came at Kelly Marie Tran with absolute racist, sexist, misogynistic hate speech, and you give them what they want, you reward those types of individuals. Now, maybe that's not your thinking behind it, but God, the optics on it from the outside looking in, that's exactly what it looks like. It was an absolute travesty. And you cannot convince me that you could not give Rose Tico more to do in that film. Holy moly. But the complete erasure and the sidelining of Rose, it really just makes me super uncomfortable.
Yeah, I really don't have too much to add to that point, except for I 100% agree. Again, the idea that this movie is some kind of apology tour for The Last Jedi is incredibly valid and regrettable at the same time. If you didn't like the direction that character went in The Last Jedi, then you can do something unheard of in the annals of cinema. You can let the character grow and progress and change through the course of the story. Imagine if Rose had an actual storyline in this movie and learned something new, and because of that changed into a different, maybe even more interesting person. It's called character development. We should try that sometime in Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't mean to speak ill of Carrie Fisher, but they literally sidelined her with the character who they were having to jump through hoops just to develop anything for her because of her unfortunate passing. That's the treatment that they gave her. That's crazy to me.
I totally agree with that.
All right, Dave, your last big fix. Oh man, it is very meme worthy. At least it gave us that.
Look, I want to go ahead and talk a little bit about Rey taking the Skywalker name at the end of The Rise of Skywalker. And I want to be very, very clear before I get into this. I think the notion that family goes beyond genetics and beyond blood is a beautiful thing. I think the notion of adoption is a wonderful and beautiful thing. And I do believe that families come together in so many different ways that go beyond, sharing some DNA. And I think that's really how it should be. And that's always how my family has been. My family, as I was growing up, always forged extremely strong bonds with people and accepted them into the family, whether they were related to us or not. And that always meant a great deal to me. So when I say that I have a problem with Rey taking the Skywalker name, I am not talking about having a problem with the notion of Rey becoming a Skywalker. I have a problem with the execution of how Rey became a Skywalker. what we have here is a very strange situation. So first, Rey goes to train with Luke and spends however long with him, but their relationship is very contentious, and I would argue probably not particularly close. And then she continues her training with Leia, who, while being related to Luke, being, Luke's sister, never apparently took the Skywalker name. So she was still going in the sequel trilogy by General Leia Organa. So if you are postulating then that she was particularly close with Leia, which again they could not show us because of Carrie Fisher's untimely passing, why is she taking the Skywalker name? And if you wanted her to take the Skywalker name because she felt feelings like Luke was almost a father figure to her, then why did you not show us that kind of relationship previously? Or better yet, even within this movie? Because ultimately, there was no reason that Luke could have not been a little bit more in this movie and forged some kind of bond. I'll talk a little bit more about that in the lightning round. But given Carrie Fisher's passing, leaning a little bit on Luke's Force ghost could have been an interesting way to go. But what we end up with is a situation where she takes the Skywalker name in a scene that feels completely arbitrary and tacked on. And in all honesty, it feels a little bit dishonest because we never saw her, develop this close relationship with Luke. And we never got to see her develop a really close relationship with Leia, who doesn't even go by Skywalker. I'm shocked she wouldn't feel like she wanted to take on the Solo name, since she's much closer with the Solos in this trilogy. She, looks up to Han Solo and is horribly mad when he dies. She develops a very strange relationship with Ben Solo. She's being, trained as a Jedi by Leia Organa, who is, the mother of Ben Solo. Like, shouldn't she by all rights be more connected to the Solos? It's just such a strange move within the context of the trilogy. And it goes back to this thing we've talked about many times, which is planning. If you wanted Rey to become a Skywalker in the end, to be accepted into this family and to choose to take that name on, that's a great idea. She comes from nothing, because that Palpatine thing is silly. She comes from nothing and is accepted into this family and takes the name for herself and represents the best of that family moving forward as the last one standing. That's a great character arc, but you didn't show us that character arc. You just threw a scene at the end of the movie where she arbitrarily takes the name. And that is, I think, why some fans feel very negative towards that scene. It's not earned in the course of this movie or over the course of the trilogy. And that is what needs to be fixed by showing a different kind of relationship and bond with Luke, and ultimately, because he's the guy running around with the Skywalker name, and ultimately having her have those feelings of him being a father figure, and then when he's gone, she decides to take the name. That makes more sense in the course of this trilogy. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, so just at the onset, I wholeheartedly agree with your sentiments that you said at the beginning of your point. I myself, and I've detailed this before on this show, am the father of a blended family, and we don't all have the same surname. I was raised by a father who had a different surname than I did. So so I totally get what they're going for here. The reason that this particular scene, this particular choice left a bad taste in my mouth. So I'm all for it. So let's say, like you said, you want to go with Rey becoming a Skywalker and being adopted, so to speak, into that family. Sure, but I'm going to need more evidence than this. And the fact that the reason that it left a bad taste in my mouth is because of everything that I just previously laid out. It is literally a throwaway line. It's the last line. She looks over at the Force ghosts of Luke and Leia. They just nod, and she says, okay, I guess that's the assent that I need, the approval that I need to just take on this surname. And then that's the last line of the movie. And then, we go back for the nostalgia bait with the double sunset on Tatooine. Like it just feels so underwhelming. And I like you said, I totally agree. If you want to go with that storyline, you want to go with that character development, all the more I'm absolutely 100% behind it. Just the execution in this, and like you said, the poor planning, it feels a little bit disingenuous because you didn't show any of that development. It has no meaning. And I know that it was interesting the way that they laid that out on the first planet that they went to with the festival. I'm forgetting the name of that planet, and the little girl asked her what's her family name, and she said they don't have one. And also, here's another way you could have gone with this. How many people throughout human history have a surname that they are not proud of, that they have a family legacy that is attached to that surname, and they have to deal with that? So I get that, but it's just, you fumbled it in every way possible. So it's the execution that's the problem that leaves a bad taste in my mouth, at least.
Can I also just point out that her burying that lightsaber on Tatooine was like one of the most disrespectful things she could have possibly done. Anakin, we know, hated sand.
Anakin in the sand!
and Luke wasn't a big fan of Tatooine himself and wanted to get off of it as fast as possible. Then had to come back there and almost get killed by a Rancor in Jabba's palace. Like, there are no positive memories for Skywalkers on that darn planet. Can we just maybe not bury the lightsaber on the last place these people ever wanted to go to?
From Anakin's part, I was literally enslaved there. Why would I want that back?
Yeah, it's a very, very odd moment. But again, it's that nostalgia bait. Got to go back to Tatooine. All right, Chris, I think we are ready for the lightning round. Throw me your first lightning round improvement.
Dave, one of my favorite movies of all time is Ryan Reynolds and Sandra Bullock, The Proposal. And one of my favorite lines from said movie is Ryan Reynolds' character says, "The woman's as subtle as a gun." And I immediately thought of that line when you have General Hux literally just saying, "I'm the spy." That line was as subtle as a gun. Like, come on. Seriously, I mean, like, I don't even know. Like, so some kind of anything beyond just, "I'm the spy."
Yeah, it's funny too, because that whole idea that Hux hates Kylo Ren so much that he would like betray the First Order is actually a really, really interesting idea. It's just another interesting character completely wasted. I would have loved to see more of that whole situation.
Here's an interesting improvisation right here. Here's a fix. We know that they hated each other. That was very clear throughout all three films. Why not make him rise to be the big bad instead of Palpatine? And it's that enmity, that hatred between the two of them that's the cause of it.
I would love that. Oh, Hux ascends. Yeah, that would have been a very, very interesting situation.
And we talked about this in The Last Jedi. Domhnall Gleeson is absolutely brilliant in that role, but they reduced him, even in The Last Jedi, I'll admit, they reduced him to this buffoonery, even though it made me laugh when he was tossing around like a ragdoll. That was fun to watch. But it was even more so here. Like, he's just completely inept. So I think the dude's got the chops. He comes from his blood. His dad, Brendan, is incredibly talented as well. I would love for him to have been the big bad.
I agree with that. That's actually a really good fix.
All right, Dave. Your first lightning round fix made me guffaw and laughter.
Yeah, so I'm just going to say, where the hell did this fleet and all the people manning the ships come from? That is a massive fleet, people. And there's like, Star Destroyer level stuff. And there's like thousands of people on a Star Destroyer or something. How many hundreds of thousands of people are on these ships? And who built them? And how long has this been going on? And how does nobody notice this crap? The amount of resources alone it would take to build that many ships. Like, there's some really stupid people in this galaxy. Like, holy smokes. Wouldn't it have been much more fun if all of those ships that he had were like old ships from like the prequel trilogy era? And instead of having all these, human beings manning them, because, we're supposed to believe the First Order is not that big, have like a whole bunch of like droids on there, like droidicas and all those. And he's like basically using the Trade Federation's old equipment and stuff to try to, cobble together a huge fleet, so he has this massive attack power. I would believe that over, oh yeah, not only do I have all these pristine new ships that I've built right under your nose, but I also have hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of people manning them, and we're ready to take over. It's just it stretches credulity just a little bit, Chris.
I don't know. I'm with you there. As long as we can leave the B1s out of the equation. If I hear an effing Roger Roger again, I might throw something.
Roger Roger. All right, Chris. What's your next lightning round fix?
All right, here's a nostalgia bait for you. You remember that song from the 90s, Closing Time?
Oh, yes, I do.
Okay, so after the first 30 minutes that I detailed was incredibly enjoyable at this film, the rest of the movie felt like closing time. Like, it was just like, can we wrap this up? But it was 2 hours of, can we wrap this up? It was just like, boom, 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 pushing all the chips into the center of the table so we could cash out and leave. It just took a hell of a long time to get there.
It also feels oddly like no matter how long the movie is, everything felt rushed. Nothing had room to breathe. No moment had any kind of room to breathe, and nothing of substance had room to breathe. It's very odd that on the one hand it seems incredibly boring, and in the other hand it's just so much happening, but it's all meaningless. So yeah, they definitely would need to fix that, Chris.
All right, Dave, what is next up in the lightning round for you? You kind of touched on this one earlier.
Yeah, I mentioned this a little earlier already, but the idea of Ben turning to the light side is an interesting one, but it should have happened much sooner. As I mentioned earlier, probably by the end of The Last Jedi, there should have been some kind of turn. Just because then he has to face up to the consequences, and it becomes a different story than what happened to Darth Vader. I turn, I die, and I'm free from all the consequences of my evil doery.
Yeah, as much as I'm a fan of Harrison Ford, and I enjoyed that scene, explain it however you want to, just emo boy in the rain, chucking a lightsaber and another temper tantrum just kind of fell flat for me, and now he's redeemed.
Emo boy. You're pretty close actually there, Chris. All right, what else you got for our lightning round fixes?
Next up is Deus Ex Force Ghost. Force Ghost can apparently do anything now. In the original trilogy and the prequels, they just stand fireside for a little chat, or just tell you little inspirational quotes as you're about to blow up the Death Star. But now they're lifting X-wings finally after 30 years of failing to do so. Yeah, so Force Ghost being able to do anything and everything was, just mind-blowing here.
Yeah, Force Ghost should not be able to affect the physical world. Appearing and talking to people is one thing, but when we got the whole Yoda throwing lightning in The Last Jedi, and what Luke does in this one, it begs the question, why didn't Obi-Wan, after he died, just kind of show up and kill Vader? I mean, it's not like Vader could kill him again. So like, hey, now I'm a Force Ghost, I'm invincible, but I still have these powers, so I'm just gonna go ahead and punk you. How about that? You dead, Vader. Like, what's the point of anything if the dead can just come back and do the job for you? That completely belittles the struggle of the living characters in these stories. Yeah, it's absolutely silly. I totally agree with that. That should not be a thing.
So your next point in the lightning round makes me think of a psych line that didn't quite make it in the Last Jedi episode.
Yeah, look, you cannot keep acting like somebody's going to die in order to give your story a sense of stakes, and then go back and say, just kidding, not actually dead. You did it with Chewbacca. You did it with C-3PO having to have his memory wiped. Oh, we're just kidding, Chewbacca's not dead. Oh, we're just kidding, we can restore C-3PO from a backup we did earlier. Like, this constant faking out is just disingenuous. At some point, your audience is like, yeah, you're not going to kill anybody. You don't actually mean it. There are no stakes, and I'm bored now.
Yeah, that was the turning point of the film for me. I really thought when Rey blew up that transport and supposedly killed Chewie, I was like, man, I'm here for this. Like, we are going in a completely different direction for a change. Like, it was a welcome change from Luke, who resisted the dark side pretty much at any and every entry in the original trilogy. And to have a character who really struggles with the dark side to a great degree like that, I thought would have been super compelling. But then, nope, we get the rug pulled out from under us at every turn.
And just as an addendum, I think we can be very clear that Force lightning is not hereditary. So the idea that Rey shoots lightning from her fingertips does not automatically make her a Palpatine, because we know other characters have thrown Force lightning around before. It seems like the worst kind of foreshadowing that they could have come up with.
If that's the case, then Palpatine is Father Abraham.
Yeah, dude, you need to not talk like that, okay? That this movie already gave me disturbing imagery of Palpatine reproducing, okay? I never wanted to think about that ever, Kris. It's not a thought we should have to entertain, okay?
It's a hot Sheev summer.
Oh, that's wrong. That's wrong.
Okay, that's the title for the episode, Hot Sheev Summer.
I think you found it. Yeah, that's the one. All right, Kris, what's your next lightning round?
I know this seems like a broken record and a constant point of, frustration for us, but the lighting on Exegol, it was really difficult for me. It's just so dark, and maybe that's a way to hide some of the CGI or something, but it was really hard to determine a lot of what was going on Exegol.
I agree. Turn up that light a little bit. It reminded me a little bit of Hulk fighting dogs. If you remember that very first big screen Hulk movie.
Oh yeah.
Man, was that dark. You couldn't see squat in that movie. But that obviously, we need to be careful with lighting that you don't actually alienate your audience. I agree with that.
All right, Dave, your next point is a little spicy.
Yeah, so they had to go ahead and add that Poe has a smuggling past. And I was like, look, can you not come up with any new characters? Do you literally have to try to turn Poe now into Han Solo? Does everybody have a smuggling past that even is remotely Solo-like? This is just this mold of character that's just coming off an assembly line. I really liked some of the comic book work that was done with Poe's background, particularly his parents and how they were involved with the rebellion and the early goings of the New Republic and stuff. That was all really interesting. I didn't quite understand why they then needed to go ahead with this movie and add this whole smuggling thing. It seems redundant. Why do you need to try to make Poe more like Han Solo? It's just make him his own character.
Yeah, and it's just frustrating. It's the same old, and we and I'll get into this in my next point, but we just can't do anything new because that's scary, and change is scary.
Well, let's go ahead and get into it, Kris. What is your next lightning round point?
So anything, and this is just a microcosm of the entire trilogy. Anything that is new and promising and cool is quickly snuffed out by the old and nostalgic. How many freaking slow motion pans do we need of the Millennium Falcon? I love that ship. I love it so much, but God, we get it. So, I mean, any new development by a character is just kind of completely subterfuge by just the good old stuff. The only thing that I thought that was super old and nostalgia driven that was absolutely perfect in this film, and the only thing in this movie that I would not change a thing about, is Billy D. Williams. He is perfect and he is inflappable.
He's always perfect. I'm just going to go ahead and say this. Given the strong connection between the Millennium Falcon and Han Solo, that ship has no business flying without Han Solo.
Yep.
That ship should have died when Han Solo died. That thing should have exploded, crashed, I don't care, flown into a sun. That thing has no business being around without Han Solo in that cockpit. It's just that simple.
Well, case in point, I'm telling you, I have, black is my favorite color, but is something as simple as Poe's X-Wing being black was super cool and innovative, but that takes, second fiddle to the Millennium Falcon again.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Let's do something new, guys.
All right, Dave, what is your final point in the lightning round?
Oh, the speculation. The speculation over and over again when we first heard of the Knights of Ren. Then when we had that very brief flashback in The Last Jedi to the day that the Knights of Ren attacked the Jedi Academy. Oh, they must be formidable enemies. And then here they kind of show up and are punked in 5 seconds by Ben Solo. Is there anything more disappointing in this whole series of movies than the Knights of Ren, who are hinted at the name is even taken as the new last name from Ben Solo when he goes by Kylo Ren, and yet at the same time they're completely a non-entity, useless, contribute absolutely nothing, and aren't even particularly cool. Could you have not done anything with the Knights of Ren in this trilogy? Nothing at all. That was a super, super disappointment.
Yeah, and you hinted at this before with the Poe comics, but from what I've heard, at least word of mouth, the Kylo Ren comics have done a good job of telling that story. But we're back with the Clone Wars and Star Wars Rebels, the animated series. We're relying on secondary and tertiary materials to tell the story you should have been telling in the movies to begin with.
That's exactly right. It's just so silly. Like, just tell a complete story within your trilogy and stop requiring me to like read 50 million comic books just to get a kind of a sense of what the story's about.
And if we wouldn't have been baiting with the nostalgia, we could have told those stories.
Imagine that. All right, Chris, final lightning round point. What have you got?
So I really am. I was excited by even the promotional, photography for the character of Jannah. I think her hair is gorgeous. She looks like super compelling. Introducing these amazing horse-like creatures was fascinating. But the clunky introduction of this character, and like I said previously, anything that is new and cool and exciting is completely sidelined. Like, she barely gets any screen time. And just from the outside looking in, thinking back on all these three films, it feels a little bit uncomfortable how they kind of pigeonholed her in here, kind of it seems to be as a wedge between Finn and Rey, that unmistakable chemistry that they had in The Force Awakens, and then you completely separate them for most of the film in The Last Jedi, and then this is just Rey and Kylo sitting in a tree, and then Jannah is like, no, this is going to be Finn's kind of love interest because he's kind of getting too close to Rey, and we have to put someone in here to kind of put a space in between them so we can continue only giving the storyline and the real kind of something to chew on to Rey and Kylo, because they're the ones that are put up on the pedestal. So as much as I love that character and I want something of substance there, I also want a spin-off with her and Lando when they go find out who her parents are. Like, that would be amazing. But I think, it's just another situation where non-white characters are very poorly served in the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, and I think I also want to point out that whole ending scene between her and Lando was super awkward. Like, it almost felt like he was hitting on her, and it made it even more awkward. I think there was an interview,
which would be in character for Billy D. Williams.
True, but I remember like in an interview or something that somebody from behind the scenes of the movie, listeners might correct me. I might be wrong, but I seem to recall reading an interview at some point where somebody said that the implication of that scene was supposed to be that she may actually be Lando's daughter.
I remember that.
So that made that whole scene even creepier. But yeah, there's an interesting character. Once again, it felt like it's just a character that was thrown in there and introduced without actually being served by the movie because, hey, maybe we can have a novel or a video game or some kind of spin-off media about this character rather than doing something interesting within the movie itself.
And here's the most interesting thing about the character to begin with, that and I will give this connection between Finn and Jannah that was worthwhile, but once again, never followed up on. The fact that they were all stormtroopers too, and Finn was not the only one, but that storyline went absolutely nowhere because it didn't involve Rey and Kylo.
Exactly right. And this whole notion even of Finn leaving the stormtroopers and other people being inspired by him and all that is a story of substance. And you're right, it didn't go anywhere. All right, ladies and gentle people, we did our best to try to fix the Rise of Skywalker. Were we successful? Please let us know on social media. We would love to hear from you. And after a quick break, we will be right back with the final segment of our show, Nerd Commendations. Stick around. Ladies and gentle people, the time has come for probably the best segment. It's time for That's right, Nerd Commendations, where we recommend new nerdy media or maybe some old nerdy media that we just now encountered and tell you all about why you too should enjoy it. Kris, what's good?
So, staying on brand with my nerd news report, I've been a tad obsessed with the Witcher universe of late. After finishing up The Wild Hunt, I got an incredible deal, as I mentioned previously, on the Dark Horse Comics digital omnibus. I'm rewatching season 1 on Netflix. Being the bookworm that I am, I was dying to read all of the novels, but I'm realizing more and more that digital is just the way to go for me. And getting my hands on all the novels isn't exactly a cheap mission to undertake. Thankfully, I remember that our school library allows students and staff to borrow ebooks through the service called Overdrive. That gave me many happy returns when the selection of reading landed within the parameters of what was deemed appropriate for middle-aged school children, like Harry Potter, things of that nature. However, let's just say that these books don't exactly meet that criteria. Witcher is not appropriate for 12 to 14-year-olds. Taking all of this into consideration, I visited the website of our local library, if for no other reason than to see if they had copies of the physical books. I was absolutely delighted to find that they also had 15 copies of the ebooks out for digital loans through an app called Libby, Libby, which turns out to be powered by Overdrive, same service. I'm now 2 books into the series thanks to this easy-to-use app which interacts directly with your reading app of choice. I personally go with Kindle, but it also connects to Apple Books and Google Books as well, I believe. And I couldn't nerd commend it anymore. If you get tied down and don't finish your selection in 14 days, you just go in and renew it like you would any other library book. Your spot will be saved. Like let's say, for example, the second book of the franchise, I was about 5 chapters in, had to renew it. When I went back into the app, it was right where I left it. So if you're like me and you really want to tackle some of these popular book series that are getting the on-screen treatment, check the Libby app. Again, that's Libby, in cooperation with your local library. Just make sure that you have your free library card handy.
Is there actually anything better than the library? I mean, seriously, dude. My whole reading habit got jump-started by public libraries, and I'm so glad that they found a way to move into the digital age and do this kind of stuff where you can, check out ebooks and read them on your devices. I absolutely love Overdrive. I've used it quite a bit, and I'm a huge fan, so I totally second your nerd commendation, Kris. Especially if you're cash-strapped, never forget your public library for comic books, for nonfiction, for novels, for short stories, for anything. Your local library is really there to serve you and to get you hooked up with all the nerdy media you could ever want. And on top of all of that, it's free.
Yeah, absolutely. And if for no other reason, if I have some free time, I just go there and, just be in the presence of books, and the smell of books is always delightful to my nerdy book heart.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you, Kris.
All right, Dave, what is your nerd commendation for this week?
So this might be an old one. I don't care. It's everything old is new again. But this is available now on Nintendo Switch, but I've been playing it on my good old 3DS, believe it or not. I whipped out my 3DS recently and didn't realize I still had a copy of Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Trilogy. This video game series is a huge deal, and I'd never really played it. And I finally decided to sit down and play the first of the first trilogy. So this is a courtroom adventure series. It's sold over 6.7 million copies worldwide. In the game, you become Phoenix Wright, a attorney, and you have to fight to save your innocent clients in a court of law. And dude, let me just tell you, the mysteries are very interesting. The game mechanics are fascinating, and it is so weird and over the top, and of course distinctively Japanese, that it doesn't really resemble any real court of law that I've ever heard of. But at the same time, the storytelling in it and the game mechanics are just so enrapturing. So you have each case lasts up to 3 days, and part of the day can be spent either in an investigation or in the courtroom. So you're going around, you're interviewing people, you're gathering evidence, and then you go to court and you try to basically punch holes in the stories of various witnesses. You try to catch them in contradictions or where the evidence contradicts their statements, in the hope of clearing your clients and finding the actual perpetrator of the crime. And the game has really, really fun sense of humor, bright, colorful graphics. It's so much fun to try to figure out who actually committed the crime and how you're going to prove it, poring over all this different evidence, looking at the facts from like coroner reports and gathering shards of broken glass. And it's an absolute blast. I cannot believe I have been sleeping on the Phoenix Wright series for so long. I'm most definitely going to play through the trilogy, and hopefully I can pick up some of the later games as well. I know there's at least 2 more Phoenix Wright games. There's a couple of spin-off series and even a crossover with the Professor Layton series, which is sort of a mind puzzle riddle kind of game. So this is absolutely up my alley. It's very, very unique gameplay. And as I've said many times, I just like games sometimes that I can play and chill, and it's not all shooty, bang, bang. And Phoenix Wright is exactly what I've been looking for. So this one comes highly recommended, Chris.
Oh my God, man. I am so ready for this game. I knew nothing about this, but this is like a hodgepodge. This is like a potpourri, stew, if you will, of all the things that I love. Like, I read every single John Grisham novel when I was a kid. I was, criminal justice major till I decided to go into teaching. Like courtroom dramas, Boston Legal, that was my jam. And then I see Capcom, and that's, another magic word for me. So I love this over the top kind of, very Japanese, like, oh, it's just so big and boisterous. And I'm absolutely here for this. And, I've been looking for something to draw me back to the Switch. I have been on a bit of a Switch hiatus. I played a bunch of the games, if not all the ones that I purchased in that initial onslaught and that newness factor of getting a Switch. So I've been playing a lot of Game Pass on Microsoft, on my Xbox, and getting my bang for my buck out of there. But I think this sucker will bring me back to the Switch. And I'm right there with you, man. I love to just sit back and chill with my Switch. And, games that make me use my brain and stay active. I love puzzle games. I love kind of like those hidden object type of games. So I'm absolutely here for this. I'm going to have to go check this sucker out.
Yeah, again, it's just an absolute blast. So it is available on the Switch. I think it's on the eShop right now for $29.99, but you are getting, 3 complete games in that package. It's also available, I want to say, on Xbox and Xbox One and PlayStation 4. I seem to recall that came the Trilogy came to those systems to great fanfare. But I've been playing it on my 3DS, and I have to say, I'd forgotten what a good system the 3DS was. That system really knocked it out of the park, and totally deserves credit for keeping Nintendo's handheld division afloat, so to speak, until the Switch came along and kind of united all of that. Just an absolute fantastic system, Chris.
Yeah, and I remember my younger sisters, after I graduated and got out of the house, my younger sisters got those, and I would come back and visit, and I would totally steal theirs and play it a little bit, and it was super fun. So yeah, those were good times, man.
All right, ladies and gentle people, there you have it. Another episode of the Nerd Byword podcast. If you enjoy what you just heard, please get on your favorite podcasting platform and leave us a rating and or review. We are available wherever podcasts can be found, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio. We are, of course, on Amazon Music, and of course, on our very own website, nerdbyword.com.
You can also hit us up on social media at Nerd Byword on Instagram and Twitter. And if you're looking to get your hands on some great steals on comics, I have recently made the decision that physical comics are just not a feasible thing for me. So I am selling almost giving away some of these great deals on comics. So be sure to check out some great deals on our Instagram page at Nerd Byword. Also be sure to check out our brother slash sister slash sibling podcast, X of Words, where you'll see me and my other mutant friends furthering our radical mutant agenda. So if you find yourself reading all the X books and Krakoa and Araco and you don't know what to make of heads or tails of anything, be sure to head over to X of Words and check out that as well. And as always, stay well, stay nerdy.
The Nerd Byword is written and produced by Kris and Dave, two nerds with a love of all things pop culture. The podcast features music by Al Jimenez with additional drops composed by Joe Biondi. Our show art is by Ashery Design. Find us at nerdbyword.com and wherever podcasts are available.